Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today for this Tales of the Cocktail 2021 session, the Mother of Spirits. I'm really excited to do this seminar with my wonderful panel today. I was pretty inspired by lots of the stories that we have of women coming up in the industry, either through production or even as bartenders or as operators and owners. I think we are in a really wonderful day and age to be a woman and to be really proud about the accomplishments that we have had. And my panel today, I think, really reflects that. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of an intro to everybody and allow everyone to talk a little bit about themselves and where they come from and their journey with us, but also to share a lot about other women's journeys, right? The unwritten history that was either not documented or hidden, or even in some cases banished from really being communicated about. And, you know, the real origin of me coming up with this was that I keep seeing articles or books or little tidbits out in the world all about how this one woman did this one thing for this one part of the industry. And that's completely true. There's lots of information across the entire hospitality industry of how women have really impacted the entire history from all the way back from ancient times to current day. But there really wasn't a comprehensive discussion around all of the different things that women have done, especially as creators, to really influence the path of spirits, in many ways, the creation of it, which is why we kind of use the mother motif a lot here. And also how we want to reshape our future as well. So the context of it is really based around the past, the present, and the future of how women in this industry, in particular in production, of spirits production and creation, have been a participant of it all along the way. And joined with me today is Mallory Omara. So she's our first panelist. She's going to be talking a little bit about the history. So Mallory, if you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your history, that would be wonderful.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here today. I am not a distiller. I'm not a bartender. What I am is an author and a historian. I'm the author of the upcoming book, Girly Drinks, A World History of Women and Alcohol. It comes out October 19th. And Jessamine and I, when we first talked, we were so excited because what my book is all those things that she was just talking about. I was very frustrated when I got into cocktails a number of years ago and really wanted to read about them. And I realized that there were no women's histories, so I had to write it myself.
If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, right?
As per usual.
And all of the panelists today are drinking a little bit something special just to share. So Mallory, do you want to share about what your beverage of choice is today?
I would love to. Yes. So I am actually drinking an Imperial Russian Stout because a lot of folks don't know that the reason, so really heavy, really dark beers are always associated with men, but it was actually, this beer was invented for Catherine the Great, who was a huge beer fan. And the reason why they invented it for her is because she loved this like dark English stout, but they realized it could not be exported because it was, it was going to go bad by the time it got to her in Russia. So they upped the ABV and they created what they called the Imperial Russian Stout for her, and she loved it. She got tons and tons of the stuff exported, and her whole court drank it. So yeah, I thought it would be fun to drink this today to show that this is what a girly drink looks like.
Yeah, it sure does. And my next panelist is Joy Spence, who I affectionately call the Queen of Jamaica and the Goddess of Rum, but I think she is technically the master blender of Appleton Estate. Joy, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Well, it's great being in this seminar with these two wonderful ladies. I'm so proud of them. And as you said before, I am the master blender for Appleton Estate Jamaica Rum. I actually started out in academia as a lecturer in chemistry. Then I decided I wanted to get some industry experience. And so I joined Tia Maria as a research chemist, got very bored there. So after 2 years, I went over to J. Ray Nevy, which owns Appleton Estate. They hired me as a chief chemist, and my job at the time was to take the laboratory into the 21st century. And that's when my whole life changed. That's when I met the previous master blender and discovered a whole new world, the world of rum. And I realized that I could actually use my sensory skills as part of my craft. So I was able to combine both art and science for a career path. And it has been a wonderful experience for me. And in 1997, when Owen retired, I was appointed master blender. And at that time, we found out that I was the first female in the world in the spirit industry as a master blender. So I was quite happy to literally break the glass ceiling for other females in the industry. And today I have my Appleton Estate 12-year-old rare cask, which is a rum just to have neat. And I really like this rum because I enjoy those beautiful toasted hazelnut notes, a little warm oak, rich vanilla, vibrant coffee and cocoa notes. And on the taste, it is absolutely divine. There's a long, bittersweet finish, absolutely luscious. So sit back and enjoy what we have to say today, everyone.
Obvious why I asked Joy to be a part of this panel. She's an inspiration to so many people, including myself. I would probably say everyone on this panel as well. Spoiler alert, Joy is in Mallory's book. And I think at one point in time, Joy encouraged Tracy to become a maker of spirits. So amazing things across the board with everyone here. And also a girly drink that you're holding there, Joy. And last, my last panelist is Tracy Franklin. So she is joining us actually from a lab. Yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about your history, your intro, and what you're drinking today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be able to be a part of this panel, to be able to speak with everyone today. I am Tracy Franklin. I'm currently a part of the Nearest in Jack Advancement Initiative. And as part of that program, I get to tour around the United States to different distilleries and learn from different distillers. So I am currently at Westland Whiskey in Seattle, where there is a huge push here to do some very, very unique and interesting things within the whiskey industry. And so I'm excited to be here, and I'm holding a glass of something that's not yet released, but that is currently being blended and will be released. I started in hospitality industry quite young, but really focused in on whiskey about 12 years ago and have loved every second of it. Moved through marketing and was the Glenfiddich brand ambassador, and basically happened to be at the right place at the right time. I was on a panel that was earning money for Du Nord Distillery, which was affected after the George Floyd protests. And Fawn Weaver mentioned she was starting up a program to teach people how to distill. And I was like, wait, I know how to distill. Am I going to learn more? And I reached out and she said, actually, I have a different program for you. So sent my resume, went through a bunch of things. And now I get the opportunity to be one of the first in this program to help diversify the world of whiskey. So I am very excited about what we're creating and excited about what's in this glass.
Yes, and if it wasn't clear, we have the past, the present, and the future. And since Tracy is representing the future, we might as well talk about something that's not made yet. We are going to reframe the way we look at the hospitality industry and opportunities that you have in the creative pathways of making spirits. Okay, so we're going to dig into some of the fun stuff now. We'll rewind all the way back historically, but I'm first going to share what I am drinking today. So I chose, I knew Joy was going to choose rum. That would have been a real wild card if she came out with something else. I figured I needed to pick something else within the Campari portfolio that also is influenced by women. So I chose Averna. Averna is a Sicilian Amaro, and the reason I chose it is because even though it was the recipe originates back in a monastery, and then it was given to a benefactor who was a man. At that point, when he passed away, Anna Maria Averna was his wife, and she took over and ran the business. And she actually ran the entire business for Averna and is pretty much responsible for the export of a Sicilian Amaro outside of that area and in fact into the United States. So she was actually the one who scaled the business operations and took it worldwide. And the other reason I chose it is because we actually serve Averna in this very interesting glassware ritual, which is called the womb ritual. And you did hear that right, like a womb, a woman's womb. And it's called that because it actually has the shape of a womb. And the idea is that you put the Averna in here and then you roll it flat on a table mixed with some Mediterranean herbs of your choice, which would pair really well in with all of the original botanicals that go into Averna. And I think that that's also just such a womanly way of drinking Averna. So, all right, well, let's go back pretty far, actually. Mallory, you're up first. So I'm gonna dive really far into the past here, pretty much what we would consider to be prehistory, and really talk about the first known evidence of how we have women show up as they are related to alcohol.
Yeah, so it was really women started it all. We were there first. The earliest known depiction even of somebody drinking is of a woman. She's called the Venus of Laurel, Lauralorcell, and she's 25,000 years old. She still looks amazing for her age. And she was found, she's a carving that was found in France. And it's of this nude woman. And she's drinking what we believe is mead out of a drinking horn. As folks might know, alcohol was sort of invented, but mostly discovered. And what we believe is in the very earliest days of prehistory, that people would find rainwater in beehives, and they were like, hey, let's drink this stuff. And the fermented honey, they it tasted good, it was exciting to them, and that's sort of what we believe was in this drinking horn. The funniest part about the Venus is that for a really, really long time, people didn't realize that it was a depiction of somebody drinking, because the people who found her were the male archaeologists and historians who found her were so staunch in their prejudices that women don't drink, that they believed that she was a horn blower. She was just using the wrong end. As if somebody would take the time to immortalize the world's crappiest hornblower into the side of a rock. But it's funny. This is why telling these stories is so important, because those sort of biases really, really shape the way that things are written and the way that history is made. And it's very frustrating, even though looking back now, it's very funny. It's frustrating that for a very long time, our view of women's history and women's drinking history was marred by these like very, very silly prejudices. As prehistory continued, alcohol developed sort of hand in hand with civilization. By the time Mesopotamia became a civilization and really people settled down, were making buildings, were writing, were all these sort of hallmarks of civilization, beer was a huge thing. It was a really, really important part of people's diet, and the people who were in charge of making it were all women. It was very much a women's trade. So literally the bedrock of spirits and fermented drinks trade was 100% started by women, and the way that women passed it down and shared the recipes for beer was it was a hymn to their goddess Ninkasi. She was sort of the drunken goddess. She was the goddess of alcohol, among other things like fertility. And there was this very, very long, complicated hymn to her, but what the hymn actually was a recipe for beer, what went in it, how you prepared it, and they would sing it while they made it. And that's how they taught younger women. That's how they passed it around. It really was, again, just such a feminine pursuit. It was just what women did. And then the world changed, and not for the good. In 1754 BCE, a Babylonian king named Hammurabi came on the scene, and he really wanted to unite Mesopotamia. He wanted to unite that part of the world, and he came up with this code, which, if you are American and you learn you go to an American school, you learn in the history books that, it was how civilization was founded, and that was where an eye for an eye came from, and it was this like really important turning point for civilization. But it was a very bad turning point for women, because what Hammurabi wanted to do, and what he wrote down in this code, is essentially established the patriarchy. It established the idea that women are not people, but property, and property of men. He sort of framed it as like, it's a way to protect women, but actually it was a way to take away their rights. Surprise, surprise. I know this does not sound at all familiar, and we've never heard anything like this before.
We don't like that guy.
Yeah. But he established, among many, many other things, it was no commercial activities were allowed for women outside of the home. So women who were previously in control of this massive and very, very important industry, again, beer was part of your diet. It was just something that you had alongside bread. It was really, really important. It was something you drank, but it was also gave you a lot of calories. It was really important for workers, and women were completely stripped of the industry. And it also established the idea that it is immoral for women to drink, because if you're a property, if you're property and you're not a person, they don't want you running around and drinking and being independent and making your own decisions. You're not allowed to drink. So there are different interpretations of the way that it was written, but basically, if you were a godly woman, aka a priestess, who were the priestesses of Ninkasi were the ones who were previously in charge of alcohol and making beer. You could be burned to death if you were caught going into a bar making alcohol. So there's this huge changeover. And so that is the moment in history when drinking became gendered. When I started writing the book, I thought that it was going to take me a very long time to find the specific point in history where drinking was gendered. And nope, right at the beginnings of civilization is when it started. And then hundreds and hundreds of years later, as the roots of ancient Greece began to form, a lot of the early civilizations all over the world started adopting those same ideas, this code of Hammurabi, and believing that everything was gendered, women were property, women can't drink, women can't make alcohol. So even though we have all these amazing mythological stories of these strong female characters in ancient Greece, in reality, it was really awful to be a woman in ancient Greece. It was absolutely terrible. Women were absolutely not allowed to drink at all. They were not allowed to show their hair in public. They had to be veiled if they went out into a public space. And that's when really alcohol started to become very, very closely connected to sociological power. In ancient Greece, it was considered like if you made an oath, it actually was considered to have more weight if you were drunk when you did it. So it was, the ability to drink was very closely tied to political power, social power, and of course, women were barred from that. And then when ancient Rome started to form, it also really absorbed those ancient Greek ideas about women drinking. The thing that really changed is that as Rome started to spread across the world and they became sort of absorbed, which is a very kind way of putting it, these other societies that were wine producers, they were like, wow, wine makes a lot of money. This is, and wine in Rome started out as a dry civilization. And as they became bigger and bigger producers of wine, it really sort of started seeping into the culture, and people wanted to drink wine. And first they were called the convivium, which was like the Roman drinking party. Women were not allowed. And eventually they made an exception for sex workers. And that's also where the idea that like, oh, if you drink, you must be a sex worker came from. And finally, they started letting women in, but even though they let women in, they didn't want them to drink the same thing. They didn't want, because wine, which was what the Romans were drinking at the time, was so closely tied with power, they didn't want to give women access to that. So they created a drink that was a wine made from raisins, and it was a lower ABV, and it was sweeter, and it was called Passum, P-A-S-S-U-M, and it really was the world's first pearly drink. And so that is the moment in time where drinks themselves became gendered. Yes. Very, very quote unquote. So by this point, drinking itself had been gendered for thousands of years. But this was the moment in time where drinks themselves became gendered. Because if you can't keep women out of the drinking space, you got to keep them out of the drinks.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, knowing that women were the first to do quite a lot of these things. You mentioned that they were the first to brew. They were really the first, we were there first. But that's not even just isolated to Greece or to Europe, right? There's other places around the world where this is independently happening, where women were first on the scene.
Yes, almost in every single culture. Doesn't matter where you are, what continent you're on, it's women. Women were the first brewers of sake in Japan, in Native American cultures, way, way before colonizers came over from Europe. It was women who were the ones making alcohol there. Later on in the Mayan and Incan societies, in Africa, all over Africa, different types of beer. Really, it was seen as a domestic thing, as something that belonged in the home. It was all women.
All women.
Yes, that's what I should have called my book, just all women.
All women, all the time.
Yeah.
So moving a little bit farther forward, but not too far forward, we're going to skip ahead to the medieval world, because it wasn't all terrible, right? Women didn't.
No, so what happened was, thank goodness, the Roman Empire collapsed for a number of reasons. And in the wake of the Roman Empire, of course, everything changed. All of a sudden, it was not as homogenous, many different cultures sort of branched off with different languages and different cultures. But the thing is, wine went away. You know, in order to have wine, you need to have a little bit more stable environment. And one of the reasons why the Roman Empire fell was the Gothic tribes who came down, the Goths, and they were huge beer drinkers because it's a lot easier to make beer on the go than it is to make wine on the go. So beer culture sort of took over a lot of Western Europe and England, what is now the UK. And as beer became sort of king again, women took over. I should say beer became queen because women took over. It became, again, a very domestic pursuit. And the thing that was great about beer, and at this point in time, we really called it ale because it did not have any hops in it. So the thing about what was called the alewives was that it was the only trade available that did not require a big apprenticeship. It could be done in your home while you were watching children. It could be done with the tools that you basically already had in your kitchen. And again, it was the only trade like that. So women ruled it. It was, I mean, there were barely any male brewers. It was 100% women controlled. And it was very, very important, again, because it was really the only way that women could ever be financially independent, take care of themselves, take care of their family. They could make a little extra money, or, you know, if they were single, if they were widowed, they could survive off of it. It really was a female thing. The ale house started as if an alewife made too much alcohol, made too much beer, she could stick her ale stake, which was just looked like a broom, outside as sort of the medieval version of a neon cocktail, a neon open sign, and she would set out some chairs and people would come in her kitchen and sit and drink her beer. Ale house started as just ale in a house. It wasn't a purpose-built place for alcohol like a pub would be much later on. But one big thing changed, and the funny thing is it changed because of a woman, Hildegard of Bingen, who is now known as a saint. She ran an all-female convent. She was a really, really important woman in the Christian world. She wrote many, many books, and one of them was called the Physica. And in it, she talked about all the different medicinal properties for different plants. And one thing, she was a huge beer drinker, loved beer. Her convent, they made beer. Nuns and monks really were huge beer makers. They also made wine too, but it was something that a lot of nuns did. They were called the Brew nuns, which is the coolest word ever. But Hildegard loved well-hopped beer. She loved bitter beer, and in her book she wrote about the important properties, you know, the way they can calm the stomach, but the thing that she told a lot of people about was that adding hops to beer adds an antibacterial property to it. So she helped popularize putting hops in beer. Also, it added a great flavor because, I mean, ancient beer based or medieval beer basically tasted like an old sweater. Like, it was not great beer. So any kind of flavor in it, especially if it was a strong flavor that would overpower that sort of mustiness, was great. And hops, of course, the strong flavor of bitter hops definitely does that. So she helped popularize that. And as adding hops to beer became more popular and people were like, oh, well, now it's going to last longer. Now we can start exporting it. And once beer, because with ale plus hops equals beer, then they started calling it beer. Being able to export it meant that it could be a commercial product. And then all of a sudden the men took notice. They were like, wait a minute, we can make money off of this. And that's when women started being pushed out of the trade.
It's a pattern. No, but I mean, we can laugh about it now. But yeah, I mean, it is super fascinating how all of this, just the ebb and flow, and every culture simultaneously around the world was experiencing all of these same things. Moving forward to the 1500s, I think, you know, just a little far back now, we start to see distillation come on the scene, right? So all of this history up until now has been really about brewing and fermentation, but once we get into the distilling part of it, that, you know, when you think about that, when the average person thinks about distillation, and especially the modernization of it, no one really thinks of women, but that's kind of wrong, right?
It's extremely wrong. So, I mean, just the alembic still, which is really what this, like, stills that are used for distillation is based off of, was invented by a woman. She was an alchemist that called herself Maria the Jewess. She lived sometime between the years 100 and 200. She worked in Alexandria, and she, amongst all the other alchemists, were looking for the elixir of life. And she actually found it, but it was liquor. She invented the alembic still, and it took a really long time for it to catch on for alcohol, because again, they were looking for the elixir of life. They were trying to turn lead into gold. They weren't really concerned with beverages. And it wasn't really until about the 1500s that people started putting wine in stills, distilling it down into brandy. And at first it was a medicinal thing. People, were like, oh, this is like fire water. It's it's going to help cure, any number of bazillion things that people thought they could cure with it back then, from like gallstones to, insanity, whatever it was. But at the start, when distilling started becoming widespread and popular, and the technology for it started becoming widespread and popular, again, it was a feminine thing. It was a women's pursuit. It was something that you could do in your home. It was something that you could do in your home while watching your kids. I mean, in England in the 1500s, most of the distillers were women. They were small domestic producers of things. It was just something that you would distill with any number of botanicals, herbs. People had their own recipes in various countries. Many women still have their own recipes for different cordials and different liquors, but it was 100% a female thing. It took people a while to learn how to drink distilled things. People thought, oh, well, I had a pint of beer, I can have a pint of distilled liquor, and we all know. I mean, it was like people being in college for the first time. They just like really needed to learn how to drink. Yes, but again, as soon as it became more and more commercial, women were pushed out, because once men realized that it could be a very, very lucrative product, could be made in mass. One of the biggest customers early on was the military, because it was something that they could bring at the Navy. And because during that time period, women couldn't sign contracts by themselves. The legal parameters for what women can do for business was very, very, very limited. And women were literally not able to get the capital to be able to create distilleries on that level to make for those customers. So, within a few hundred years, they were pushed right out of that too.
Yeah. Okay, so in the 1800s, though, we started to see there was a big boom in the whiskey industry, and quite a lot of that work that was happening with these distilleries were all started by men. Almost every single, whiskey story that you hear is about some guy starting this distillery in the 1800s. But similar to the story that I just told about Anna Maria from Averna, this same similar thing happened actually within Scotland and Ireland with many of those distilleries. And I'm going to toss this one over to Tracie, since she and I are whiskey motherin, sisterin. Did I just make up a word? I feel like the etymology of that word is probably not appropriate for this.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so Tracie, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what was happening was, because we didn't have the legal rights to start a distillery, we didn't have the funds, that wasn't really going to happen. A lot of the ways people got it was by their husbands passing. So it was a lot of widows who would actually mostly disregard what their husbands actually wanted, and instead of selling off the companies, would take over. So one of the ones that we know that's still going on today is with Elizabeth Cumming and Helen Cumming. So Helen got the Cardew Distillery. Her daughter-in-law was Elizabeth Cumming, and Helen was so smart, and they expanded the Cardew Distillery. And not only that, they negotiated to be a part of Johnny Walker, which at that time was growing to become a blended whiskey. And they negotiated a seat for her son to be on the board throughout his entire lifetime. So also thinking ahead, this was also happening in Ireland with Ellen Corrigan at Bushmills, even in the United States though. So George Dickel, one of the things that not everyone understands, that George Dickel passed and his wife disregarded his will and what he wanted. Oh, there it goes. I knew that was going to happen. So I do this. So Augusta Dickel actually took over. And again, they're coming at this with a business mind. They want to expand the distillery, want to create efficiency. So the distillery became even more successful under her ownership. So one of those things that we talk about is this was happening all over Scotland and Ireland, the United States. Women were stepping up to say, I am intelligent, I know how to run a business, and they just didn't have the opportunity to found it, but they were able to take over, run it, and then possibly sell it. Usually they were passing it down to a son or another male heir. And so we've got some really wonderful legacies of women who've stepped into positions within distilleries and created lifelong or changes in traditions. So we talk about Lefroy and being able to like introduce peated whiskey to the United States. I don't know, there's so much. So that's Bessie Williamson. And I am just really excited to be able to be in the whiskey industry, knowing that our history has been going for a very, very long time of women being in the industry. And honestly, it's never stopped. I think we just didn't always have that spotlight on who was in the industry. We were often pushed aside to say, oh, well, you can't do that. That's men's work. And that would be fine. But I'm going to be behind the scenes ensuring that this business is successful. So how can we do that today? I think that one of the things that we know is an issue is the actual balance and diversity within the C-suites. So if we're looking at Fortune 500 companies and who's running those companies, it's like 7% of Fortune 500 companies were run by women, and only 9% had an ethnic CEO. So we are really looking at this opportunity for growth to really change from the top down by putting more women, more people of color into these positions of power, because we know how to run a business. Women are opening businesses at double the rate of anybody else. Women of color are doubling even white women. So we're all coming into this, into all the industries, especially in spirits. We're all looking at how we can affect and change the way that spirits are made and sold and marketed. And I think as long as we continue to stay open and inclusive, we're going to see some really drastic, wonderful changes, which is what happened during the 18th and 19th century as women began running some of these businesses. I won't say that they killed off their husbands, but their husbands did pass.
No. Yeah. I mean, and all of the ones that you just listed, Tracy, is really only just like a snippet of just a fraction of some of those people were influencing the industry at that time. And even today, there's dozens and dozens of women that are running amazing companies that are in the C-suite. So even though that 7% number is really small, there's still incredible women that are in these positions. And I think that they are sources of inspiration for us all to really kind of know that is possible. And, that you can overcome all of the obstacles in front of you to get to those places. So I'm actually going to jump over to Joy here really quick and have her talk a little bit about this, because at the time when you becoming a chemist was certainly not something that was, I think, potentially holding you back, right? Like no one was like, Joy, you can't become a chemist, but there probably wasn't that many women that were becoming chemists at the time when you were. But more importantly, it wasn't even acceptable for you to be drinking rum, let alone making it, right? Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
When I joined the company in 1981, I never even had a thimbleful of rum, because it was unheard of for women in that time to be drinking rum. Because if you drank rum, you were seen as very loose and not a lady. And so when my father heard that I was actually going out to start working with a rum company, he had a total conniption. He said, "You're going to make rum? You're supposed to be a lady." And I tried to explain to him at that time. I said, "Dad, I'm just going to do analysis on the roads," not knowing that further down the road, I become the master blender. And unfortunately, he did not live to see all of my accomplishments, because I think he would have been so proud of me. And so that whole culture has changed. And now women are enjoying and drinking rum in the same way as men. And as we say in Jamaica, even Stephen, right? There's not one drinking more than the other now. And it is just seen as an approachable spirit now, where everyone can enjoy it in so many different ways.
Yeah. And actually, when you joined Appleton, you did a couple of things that sort of changed the way that you were producing rum. Well, not when you joined, but when you became master blender, there were some things, what I call like the woman's touch, that you had on the production of rum when you took over.
Yeah, when I took over, actually the first blend that I created was in 1999 to celebrate the 250th anniversary of Appleton Estate. So I wanted to add my special touch to it, to let the rums be a little bit more approachable, that both sides of the fence, female and male, can enjoy it the same way, and bringing much more fruitiness and spiciness to the rums. And so that's the flair that I actually brought, the difference I brought to it. Also, the fact that I brought a more motherly touch, to the whole process, where you would sit down and speak with the workers, not just talking about processes, but about their personal lives. I'd encourage them to buy a home. If they didn't have a car, go buy a car. Why you should buy a car, invest in a home. And so it became one big family. I brought that whole family unit back to the process. You didn't see you just had this male overpowering and just giving instructions. But here was this woman, adding this female touch, still being scientific and creative, but, being, just a soft, caring person, which is so important, in leadership capacities. And so many people now refer to me as Auntie Joy.
It's true. Going to the distillery with you. Oh, hey, Auntie Joy. Like you really are everyone's auntie. That's amazing. I want to go back to that time period, though, really kind of thinking about when your father was very disapproving of drinking rum, or at least the social norms were like that. I think Prohibition had a pretty big impact in the way that women were perceived with drinking. Ironically, there was this massive temperance movement that was really, women really led that quite aggressively. But the other opportunity that Prohibition provided was for women to actually be drinking more in these sort of darker, less out in the public eye places. So it was simultaneously, we were working against ourselves, but then also pushing ourselves forward. But that sort of mid-century ideal of being a housewife was also a big challenge, right? So we kind of see this like up and down of sort of taking back, reclaiming the abilities and the freedoms, but then sort of losing them again, being, a homemaker, just think about like Mad Men is always what I think of, but where it's like a guy drinking a glass of probably blended scotch, just hanging out, and the woman's there, and the perfect dinners at home. And so sort of themes that we continue to see with this servitude or domestic partners that are just sort of there to serve are kind of seen all over with women and with drinking culture. But we really start to see that change, I think, as we break the mold here with Joy. And I was just hoping you might share a little bit about your experience, Joy, with like, what was that like to be the first?
It was not an easy road. I had so many challenges. I think the first one was persons objected to the managing director appointing me as the master blender. And they told them frankly that in Jamaica, saying Jamaican lingo, woman can't make rum, that sort of thing. And what craziness are you doing here to have this female, being the master blender? And they just said, look, she's the right person at the right time, and we have the greatest confidence in her. But I had managers telling me that really I should be staying home and changing diapers. I shouldn't be there. I should not be doing this operation at all. And if I really followed the negativity, I wouldn't be where I am today. But I just use all of these challenges as an opportunity for improvement. I use it to help other women realize their full potential in the business. And it wasn't just in Jamaica. When I started to travel, I had great difficulty with immigration, because they'd ask you what your profession is, and I would tell them I'm a master blender, and they would never ever believe. And I'm saying to myself, why would I select this out of all the world to say that I'm a master blender if I'm not a master blender? I remember one time in Miami, the customs officer, he started to search my luggage because he didn't believe me, and he started to ask me more things. And then the customs officer next door to him, he didn't have anybody, so he was now listening to the conversation. Then when he looked across, he recognized me from the Travel Channel. He ran over, went down on his knees and said, oh my God, you're the rum lady. You know how long I wanted to meet you. Of course, my customs officer now could only apologize, and if he could dig a hole in the ground, he would. But believe you me, even traveling today, I still have that problem with immigration. They never ever believe that, that I am the master blender, unless sometimes they say, your face is very familiar. I say, yeah, I have a very familiar face, because I can't bother with the story that I'm on TV and all these programs, because he's not going to believe what I'm trying to tell him. One time going to Cayman, that was a funny story. So they said, okay, apparently they have a checklist for occupations, right? And the immigration officer said, well, we don't have master blender in our checklist. So I said, are you telling me that I can't enter Cayman? So she says to me, well, I just appointed the marketing director for the day because that's on the checklist. I enter Cayman as a marketing director.
You have many lives, Joy. You've done so many things. I wonder what they've checked on the box for all of the different times you've come through immigration.
Oh, please, please.
Master Blender will ever show up on there. I want to ask the same question to you, Tracy, because I think, you know, you're coming from a different generation, a different time, and also a different country. And I wonder if your experience is any different, or if you really kind of experienced some of those same obstacles.
Well, I think that I think that thanks to Joy and a lot of women who were coming up around those times, working in distilleries, it was easier for me. It has been an easier journey. I think we are still kicking down some of the stigma that's around women and spirits. I think within the Black community, that is something that not a lot of people think about, but alcohol is still perceived to be really negative. Like, you aren't drinking alcohol, shouldn't, you know, you try to kind of do that at home. You don't want to, if you are a good Christian, you don't drink a lot of alcohol. And so that's something that I've definitely fought against, because my parents don't drink. So my mother and father didn't drink growing up. And so then as I started to learn and joined the hospitality industry, and then was like, I love whiskey, let me teach you. And I'm teaching everyone how to drink all these things. And my parents were like, oh my gosh, our daughter's an alcoholic. So even just consumption is sometimes an issue within certain cultures and certain communities. I think that as women also, we have to be able to carve out our own space in the industry. Whereas I think that for a long time, it has been about conforming. So women had to be more masculine. We had to allow some of those unsavory jokes and touches and things. There was a point when that was the way to get through, was to kind of like, okay, I'm gonna just be one of the guys. And what I think is happening now is those people who've gone ahead of us and kind of took the barbs are now also saying that enough, like that that's not how this next generation needs to come into this industry. We want to ensure that we're creating safe spaces and inclusive environments for everybody, where they're able to come as their true selves, which is only going to allow people to truly shine. And so I'm really excited for that to become even more a part of our industry, of really understanding that it doesn't need to be this very manly, it doesn't need to be like an aggressive environment to create spirits. That's never actually needed to be a part of it. So for me, it's been incredible to learn from so many women who've come before me, and men who've reached down and been like, you're cool, let's teach you. And I think that there's more to come, and I'm really grateful.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I mean, I'm so excited for you. When I heard that you got the opportunity that you did, I was like, I'm so just supremely jealous, but also supremely happy for you, because I think it's so amazing. But you know, like there are still so many things in our way, but I think having like these mentors that are already out there, all of these women that are creating their own companies, that are, you know, controlling the way that we produce spirits, it really does make me feel like I could do it, right? And it was one of the reasons that I even wanted to go and get my general certificate in distilling, and, you know, was super excited about the production side, because most people don't, you know, although they consider me a spirits educator, I don't necessarily always, you know, exude this, you know, like that I could walk in and run a, like, you know, run a still or something like that. But that's just so amazing. And I think that's so easy to get lost in the gender of all of it. Like, oh, you can't do this because you're a man, or, you know, a woman, as opposed to there being just so many men in the distillery. It becomes difficult. I mean, I don't know if Joy's life would be different today if Owen Tulloch hadn't actually been like, you're the right one for the job. I believe in you. And so that mentorship and that belief that happens, I think is so incredible, really, you know, to be able to have the opportunity to pass it on.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
I think that we are really lucky now that, and I think we're going to kind of discuss it a little bit later, but where we have the opportunities to really, a lot of education and things, is resources are available online. So we're able to bypass some of the gatekeeping and things to get to positions that we weren't able to get to before. So I think that that's definitely a benefit that we're all going to see as well. It's just that access, being able to go online and be like, I'm going to get my GCD, like, and all of that's available online to anyone that wants to.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think visibility is a massive part of this, not only for diversity, for just seeing people and know people that look like you, that are you, doing the stuff that you are is such an important part of paving the way for others. And Joy, I think you've often said that the visibility for you going on global tours was, this is before the internet really was widespread. So you can really Google Joy Spence and learn about how amazing she is. But like going to another country was really how you started to kind of elevate yourself and your position, but also the fact that women are these creators and traveling around the world.
Yeah, because I started my global tours in 2000. First stop was Canada. So it was a big, big event for me. And that was when, my first real global exposure, being on TV, being interviewed for newspapers, being in magazines. And I really did tours from the East Coast to the West Coast of Canada. So word started to get out, because before I was just, confined to this island, not much communication coming out. And then people started to see who I was, what my accomplishments, and that's when it spread. And so I started to tour all the countries. So I've been to over 20 odd countries in terms of tours from Far East down to New Zealand, the entire USA, entire Europe, entire Canada. And so it has been a wonderful experience. And I must say, I have been able to really help other females in the industry. I have to tell you that the last time I went to Tales, I was in the lobby of the hotel going for a presentation. And all of a sudden, there was this beautiful young lady from Africa going down on her knees and started to cry. And she said to me, "Thank you so much for what you have done for us in the industry." And I said, whoa, I really didn't know I had that impact. And then interestingly, when I was coming back home in the airport, a blender from one of the competition, she came to me and she said to me, "Thank you, because it's because of you why I have been elevated to where I am now in my company." And so, sometimes it's really touching to realize the impact that I've had on other women. And I really try to help them all to try and, follow their passion, follow their dreams. When I met Tracie,
Exactly.
I encourage her. I said, "You go for it, girl. You go for it."
Yeah, so I'm going to tell the story very quickly. Joy came with an event to Tampa, Florida, and I was there, and we got to blend our own expression. And I was so incredibly excited to just be able to meet Joy, but then I got to talk to her and have her taste my little blend. And I think I was so effusive that she was like, "Okay, I need this girl to just calm down. So I'm just going to tell her that she's great." No, but she really did. She's like, "You are so passionate about this. I can tell that you want to learn more. I can tell that it's important to you. So don't give up." She said, "Do not give up. Try and get to the process side. You should be blending or creating these spirits." And just knowing that Joy had been able to do it, that she's successful, and then she's out and spreading the love and support throughout the community. Being able to see a woman of color also is a very important thing, because while we talk about women in spirits, and we are here and have been, it's almost always been women that are white. Unless you are in a specific culture like Jamaica, where most of your women are people of color, but being able to then see Joy elevated within these communities that are majority white was like, wait, I can do this. I can become a blender. I can become a distiller. And then to hear those words from Joy really meant the world to me. I didn't fall on my knees and cry, but I thank you so much, Joy, for being an inspiration for so many of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an inspiration. In fact, actually, Mallory, you wrote about Joy in your book, right?
Yeah, so the book starts again at the dawn of time, but through each time period, it follows one woman's story. And Joy is the 80s and 90s chapter.
Yeah, it's amazing. In fact, actually, I want to kind of pop back over to your book for a second. Do you think that there were any patterns? We've talked a little bit about challenges that Joy had and challenges that Tracie had. And I don't know if you identified any challenges throughout the writing of your book, that sort of these patterns that continually occurred for women, or even actually, I don't know, even in your own industry as being an author, if there's anything that you've encountered.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of become my bag for being a writer, is sort of unearthing these stories that have been overlooked for so long. And I mean, the pattern throughout history is that women start something and are ahead of the game when it comes to, you know, technological innovations, whatever it is. And then as soon as it becomes commercially viable, it gets taken away from them. So that's been going from the beginning of time. Also, you notice that every time women get a little bit more freedom, men try to figure out how to take it back. You know what? You know, when women were allowed into drinking spaces, they invented girly drinks to keep us out of the drinks. You know, after Prohibition, when women were allowed more in bars, that's where our modern concept of a girly drink really started. Because before Prohibition, a lot of the cocktails that people drank were very extravagant, and men were happy to drink a julep with like an entire bouquet of 15 types of flowers and herbs inside of it. And after that, it was like, no, I have to drink an austere martini, or you know, or an old fashioned or something. That's you know, so we see a lot of these interesting misogyny is very creative, and there's always different ways that they try to keep women out. And I saw throughout all of my research for my book that I couldn't believe that some of these women hadn't been written about. A really great example, Jessamine, that you and I have talked about a bunch, is that Jerry Thomas is given the title of, you know, he wrote the first cocktail book, you know, the Bartender's Guide, and it has all these cocktail recipes in it. But because a lot of male historians they were only looking at cocktail books, not realizing that almost every single recipe that Jerry Thomas has in his book can be found in other books written by women. Sometimes maybe almost like, I think America's very first cookbook, which came out in 1760 something or 1790 something, has a lot of those same recipes in it. It was written by a woman, Isabella Beeton, who is a very, very famous like household writer. She sold millions of copies of her books. She has a ton of cocktails in her book, Isabella Beeton's Guide to Household Management, that came out a full year before Jerry Thomas's book. So it's like I was saying in the very beginning with how historians didn't realize that the Venus in France was a drinking woman. It's just, there's so much prejudice and so much misogyny, and some of it isn't even full of ill intent, but it's just so baked in. And you know, like Tracy was saying too, now there's this weird idea like, oh, well, look how diverse it is. It's full of women, and it's like full of straight white women. You know, that's not what diversity is.
No.
So I'm seeing this pattern over and over again. And luckily it's starting to change. Big ships turn slowly. But I think all four of us are really starting to see a lot of really exciting progress, you know, led by and inspired by people like Joy. The more visibility we have, the more history we have, the more opportunities and mentorship we have, the more opportunities and freedom we get.
Yeah, I love that. And let's actually switch gears and talk a little bit about the future now. So I think, you know, this one's for you, Tracy, but we are seeing much more diversity in this industry. We're also seeing diversity, whether male or female, but you know, we're making progress that's really slow. But do you think that there's anything that we can do today to start making small changes or even large changes? Like, what are these things that continue to stand in our way of really helping increase our rate of diversity within the industry quicker?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things was access to education. The pipeline into the industry for a long time was controlled. Jobs in spirits tended to pay well. They tended to pass down through family. So, you know, the maltman would pass it on to his son, who would pass it on to his son. And those jobs would just continue to be passed through friends and family who tends to be the same cultural groups. So now that we're becoming more aware of these positions, companies are becoming larger, women are starting to run them. People like Alison Brand and Fawn Weaver are starting to run some of these companies. We're also looking at how we can create pipelines into the industry for a diverse group of people, not just women, not just people of color. We want ability diversity. We want cultural diversity. We want all sorts of expressions within the industry to help create innovation. So access to education is incredibly important. And I think that the fact that so much is online, like we just discussed, is going to help create a little bit of more of equality in that aspect. I think also having a lot of the different organizations that are coming up to educate consumers, to show them, oh, look, this is the whiskey industry, and here are all the positions that exist within it. Here are all the different types of whiskeys. And even just having that base education lets people think about how they can become involved. I'm what else do we do? What else do we do? I think that also having people in representation, so being able to have ambassadors who are diverse, being able to have people in the industry who, while they are process side, are also able to possibly talk in front of consumers and talk in front of guests and just say, this is something I do and I love, and you could possibly enjoy it as well. And I think that we also, for people in the industry, need to be careful in the way that we talk to others and the way that our assumptions that we're making. I think sometimes we will ostracize people by just being, like Averna and being like, yes, I love this Averna, and if you don't love it, you shouldn't be a part of this industry. Or, like this sometimes happens, or people that are really stringent about the way they drink whiskey and are like, whiskey has to be like this. And if you are somebody who's new, even if you're not necessarily looking at process, if you're just new to spirits and somebody tells you you're wrong, you are immediately, you're not going to look on that industry as positively. So being really very open, very inclusive, and I think supporting everybody that's trying to get in is all that we can do. Just making sure that we're reaching out to communities that haven't had data access. And that also implies like different cities, just smaller cities, and people who where we don't have as much education events that go into those cities. I think that's been a really important thing with online access. We've now reached people that never had that opportunity.
Yeah, and there's quite a few organizations too that I think are really great. There's Black Bourbon Society, there's COBB, they're doing wonderful things with making sure that the access to, especially whiskey, you're seeing quite a lot of these days, but just access to this education, to be an enthusiast, makes it really inclusive and exciting, as opposed to feeling like it's a world that you're not allowed to be a part of. So I think that even starting with making sure that consumers feel comfortable with consuming the products that are meant for a diverse audience is also really important, going all the way up to whether or not we're making people feel comfortable to produce them too, So, but how exciting is it when having products that are made by diverse groups of people, drank by diverse groups of people? I mean, that's the dream, right?
Absolutely. And I think acknowledging that we are more diverse than I think people actually realize too. When you walk into any distillery nowadays, there's always a woman on the floor.
Yeah.
And talking about diversity, I'm proud to be the patron for the Joy Spence Hospitality Program in the UK, which is a program for diversity. And we have our first cohort. It's a really full life cycle initiative, and it includes education, certification. They are now at the work experience phase, and of course, helping them to develop their careers. And all of them have a mentor for the program. And so I'm very proud to be part of this program, and great for Campari UK to have had this initiative.
Yeah,
and I think just for the future, for me, I am happy to be a part of that journey with Appleton Estate for us to become the leader in the premium aged rum category. And we're actually using innovation as part of this process. And so you'll be seeing many, many limited time editions coming out from Appleton Estate soon. So look out, everyone.
All right.
Yeah. More delicious rum coming your way.
Yeah.
Tracy, just going back to you, what are you, as a person who's in this process of becoming a producer and a creator, what are you the most excited about being able to influence as a maker, as a creator in the future?
Interesting. So being here at Westland, one of the things that I've really loved is that they are focused on getting off of the commodity market for their grain. And I think what's happening is we are able to now, I'm here sharing openly. I am in their lab, I am on the floor, I'm learning all of the steps of their process and all of the intricacies. And what I'm hoping will exist as I move through this industry is that we all start to do that more often, that we start to share our knowledge. I think for a long time, the larger companies wanted to keep all of that technology because it could lead to financial gain or innovations that would help them with that bottom line. But as we are sharing all of these innovations, all of this knowledge, all of these theories with each other, we are all raising those ships. We are all innovating. We are becoming a better industry completely globally. And so that is for me, the biggest thing is becoming a part of the process and being able to create a network of people who want to share their knowledge, who want to create a better industry. And I know that I've already got some really wonderful people. So even just with my mentors, so Nicole Austin at George Dickel, Becky Harris at Catoctin Creek, and people that are just stepping in to help lift me up and educate me, but also do not care if we are all sharing ideas and changing this industry for the better.
That's amazing. Yeah. What is your biggest hope for the future of women in the industry, just in general?
My biggest hope is that we won't have to talk about it. That we will no longer be like, oh, there's women in the industry, because I think we're really close to that. There are women doing everything. There's not a single role, I think, within the industry that hasn't been done by a woman. And now it's becoming just much more routine. But my goal is that we create a point where it's past cis het women, where we're able to really be diverse in our expressiveness, where we're able to walk into a room and own all of who we are, to bring our full selves to work, to bring all of our ideas. I'm just hoping that that's what we'll one day be able to express, whether you are man or woman, black, white, straight, gay, I don't care, but that this industry will accept you 100% the way that you are.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Mallory, same question to you. And also, I don't know if you want to also just talk about the future for cocktail books, if you have any insights there as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, we're starting to get sort of an embarrassment of riches historically, comparatively. Just last year, the first ever cocktail written by a trans person in general, but a trans woman, A Year of Queer Cocktails by Harmony Moon Colangelo was released. It's a really, really incredible book. I highly, highly recommend anybody pick it up. We had Shannon Mustafer's book, Modern Tiki Cocktails. She's the first Black American bartender to come out with her own cocktail book since, oh my gosh, I can't remember the exact year. I think it was in the late 1800s. Yep. And she's the first Black woman to do it, which is really, really exciting. We're starting to get more stuff like that, which is very, very exciting. Because, I mean, like Tracy said, my goal in life is to put myself out of a job. I mean, I hope someday that I won't have to I'll be able to get into something and I won't have to be like, where is the women? And I'll go to read about it and I won't have to be like, well, where are all the women in this? Where are anybody who isn't an old white guy, And we're starting to make a lot of progress towards that. It's really important for me. My hope is that, hand in hand, really in tandem with making women feel more comfortable and getting more women in the industry, more women as drinkers, more women as everything. I really want women to know that they have a history here. We're not all blazing trails. They've been here from go, all types of women. For a lot of disabled women, there's a part in the book where I talk about how the West Russian women who made vodka, one of the groups of women who was really attracted to it was disabled women, because it was a thing that you could do again in the home without a lot of like heavy lifting and stuff. So I just want women to know that they've always been here. They've always been here. They've always belonged here. And I think there's something really nice about getting into an industry and knowing that you don't have to blaze that trail. Knowing that, there's already many women who've been there before you. If you can see it, you can be it. And being able to get into something and just see all the cool, very, very diverse types of women who've been there and done that, it just makes you feel like home.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, last question for you, Joy. Also, what is your biggest hope for the future of this industry with women?
I think, well, first of all, I do a lot of motivational talks in all girls schools, especially when they're about to decide on their career path. And I encourage them to think outside the box for a career, and that being in the spirit world is an excellent field where you can have, apply your science, your sensory skill, your engineering skills, whatever it is, to be very successful. And they need to be passionate about whatever they're doing in this particular field. And it's also important that they remain humble, because to be successful, you need to have that some amount of humility about you for people to really and truly respect you. And so I want them just to be passionate about the craft and to realize that you as a woman can be successful in this field. And do not, think about all the resistance that you might have along the way, all the challenges, people telling you that there's no way that you can be successful in this particular field as a woman. Just focus on your skill set, your techniques, your analytical skills, your passion, and the world is your oyster. Go for it, girls, go.
I really wanted this seminar to inspire people, and I feel like it's definitely doing that to me. So yeah, Yes, Joy, yes. Well, I mean, thank you so much, all three of you, for joining me today. I think this has been such an informative session for not only where we've come from, what we can do in the future, but what our hopes and dreams are. I really hope that someone somewhere who is maybe doubting themselves just for a minute is now thinking, gosh, I can do that. I can totally do that. And there are many people in this industry that are here to help, right? My hope for women in this industry moving forward is that we all turn around and put our hand back and pull someone else forward. And I think that we are already doing a great job of lifting other women up and making sure that there's support there and that there's mentorship programs and all of these different things that are popping up. But I just hope that that never stops, because I think that that's what has really united so many of us in this industry today, and myself, I'll speak for myself, but I feel like that's one of the things that has really helped me, is just knowing that there are so many other women out there that have really inspired me to take the first step and the last, and to be where we are today. So thank you all so much. You're an inspiration. Mallory, your book is fantastic. Joy, you are amazing. Tracy, I'm so excited for what you're doing in the future. You're all incredible people. And I really hope that we can just keep carrying these torches.
Thank you so much. This has been
Thank you
wonderful.
so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it's such an honor to be here. It really, really is. When I found out that I was getting to talk to the three of you for this, I mean, incredible.
Cheers,
One
everybody.
love from Jamaica. One love.